Scooby Doo is one of the most famous cartoons ever made with tons of different renditions, and since 2009, my favourite version of the classic cartoon has been First Frights. Not heard of it? Well, it's a video game. Yeah, seriously. It's charming, funny, and an all-round great game. Now, when I heard there was going to be a sequel to this game, I was really excited. So excited when I got the game for Christmas that year, I was so happy I took a picture of it. But was I right to be as excited as I was, or was I setting myself up for disappointment? Well, let's find out by taking a look at Scooby Doo and the Spooky Swamp. Let's begin by looking at the opening cutscene.
And voila! It's like a work of art, man!
What the hell happened to the sound? It sounds pretty bad, but you do adapt. Anyway, what was the story again? Oh yeah, so Shaggy and Scooby are sick of Mystery Inc. after Velma accidentally knocks over a sandwich. Jeez, talk about a short fuse. Anyway, they catch a scent which they follow to a girl named Lila who wants them to find 2 ingredients in different areas and in return will give them the stew she's working on. At both places they have to go, there's your classic Scooby-Doo mystery. They find a monster, you wonder how Mystery Inc. hasn't figured out every time it's someone in a costume, they get caught, end of story. However, they're actually a little more developed here than usual, at least the first mystery is. It's easy to figure out who's behind it in the second one, but the first gives everyone a motive and is actually really entertaining. Though it's funny that the game's called Spooky Swamp and you spend about 40 minutes tops in the actual swamp. Kind of a marketing error there. Each area is like its own little game, so I think I'll talk about each area individually. So let's start with the swamp itself. Even though you're not in the swamp all that long, the parts you do spend time in are a ton of fun. Out of all the areas, this one is the most based on traversal and puzzles relating on how to get past an obstacle. The puzzles aren't really puzzles, they're just a way to stay engaged with the world, and they do it relatively well. On story terms, seeing as this is the leading plot, it's good. I liked it less playing through the second time while capturing footage for a reason I'll explain when I talk about the game as a whole, and it is actually a big problem with the game. The swamp sections are still creative and fun. Next up we have El Muncho, a desert town that is near deserted. I definitely liked how this is trying to be a different game to First Frights. In that game you play through levels through 4 different locations, this one has a more overworld take and it's done pretty well. The game also lets you play as any member of Mystery Inc. at any time, except from a few sections with the swamp story. All the characters have different abilities. Scooby can go through dog doors, Shaggy can grapple, Fred can push heavy objects, Daphne can climb poles a couple of times through the story. Honestly, there's like a couple of cases where you actually need her to progress. And Velma uses these computer thingies to turn the machines on, which in First Frights just had you press the buttons.
Too easy.
No kidding! Here you're given a combination and then you have to repeat it. It's still pretty easy, but it's still an improvement. Anyway, El Muncho has a really interesting mystery to it that keeps you guessing till the end, and while I did get it right the first time, I do remember pausing before making the choice as to who done it. But a good story is one thing, how is the gameplay? Well, you run, then you combat. You fetch something, then you combat. You solve a puzzle, then you combat. Then you get chased, then you combat. You talk to someone, then you— oh, what a shock! More combat. Wait, am I just reviewing the first Uncharted now? The combat is fun, just repetitive as hell, mainly because they give you so damn many enemies. Take this portion, for example, where you have to find some clues. They just cram so many enemies to attack you. I get it would be boring if all you did was run around, but couldn't you just have certain areas where enemies spawn? Or not as many? And unfortunately that's a lot of the gameplay. You do have some fetch quests of a kind occasionally, but I found them to be perfectly fine. You also have chase sequences, which were in First Fright, and were some of my favourite parts of that game. There's still a lot of fun here, even if all you're doing is running to the screen. I also like how you're actually doing detective work this time. You record audio, piece clues together, and take photos of strange sightings. Each case took well over an hour to complete, and that was even when I knew what I was doing. And there is some stuff that will keep you busy, more on that later. Now, while I did praise the story of El Muncho, there are a couple of annoyances, mainly in the presentation. Already mentioned the iffy audio, but look at how conversations look and sound.
that wretched harmonica could be heard.
Go on.
Do a stew?
To releasing the darkness in my heart that keeps me trapped.
Darkness?
I will now open the cemetery path for you. But first...
Yep.
What if people actually spoke like that? Hello, how are you? I wondered if you fancy playing a game. I am rather bored. That's good to know. And on a side note, I always found this bit kinda cheesy.
Can you take a photo of me and my harmonica? Happy memories!
I just bought a bar of chocolate. Could you take a picture so I could... And a lot of the cast lack personality.
Good day. I expect you're here to solve this confounding mystery.
He falls asleep. It is funny.
You're a little late.
Could you put a little oomph in your voice? No one's died. Let's keep things happy and jolly. Overall, Muncho is good. It's not the greatest on gameplay terms, but has a very good story surrounding it. It's enjoyable. Now let's head to the snowy mountain of Howling Peaks. I'm just gonna put it out there, if you can have the option to customize your characters, at least put it in the cutscenes. I mean, just for this area, you're given winter wear, and during cutscenes, they're still in their normal clothes. It's not a big thing, but it bothers me a lot. So it is a big thing. While the environment of Howling Peaks isn't as memorable as El Muncho, it's still pretty good. I do remember the chalet area very well, and not the other bits as much, but as long as there's at least one area that sticks with you, I think that's enough. The gameplay is also a lot better. You're doing a lot more besides attacking enemies. You do here and there are moments where there are too many enemies, but it's handled a lot better, and you do need to keep things interesting. Funnily enough, where El Muncho had a great story and okay gameplay, Howling Peaks has great gameplay and an okay story. It's not bad, but not as interesting, and I couldn't even tell who to point the hints to most of the time. The only two I did pointed to the culprit. But in El Muncho, you just get the ingredient you were looking for. No explanation why, you just get it. Whereas in Howling Peaks, you were shown them getting it, so there are a couple of story improvements. This area has some really good moments too, like when you're following the Yeti and you barely miss it was really nice at building tension. It was a great little moment, and I thought the part with the broken car was actually kinda creepy. The story is pretty good and I was really enjoying myself, but then I got to the ending. I know this is a game aimed at young kids, but the real reason Lila's making this stew is a bit rubbish, and it was something that annoyed me playing for the first time, and the build up to the final battle made it even worse replay. I would have liked it if there had been a bit more of a twist, just something more interesting than what we got. I was really let down by the end playing through the first time, and it annoyed me playing again. But once you beat the game, what is there to do? Well, you can find some ladders and sandwiches across the worlds, but once you beat each area, you unlock some mini-games. All the ones in the swamps are presented through the story, but you also have one where you have to put fires out, one where you protect a burrito stand, another where you stop enemies attacking a plow, and one where you get dirty clothes, take it to the washroom, and deliver them back good as new. There are simple but good fun. It seems to be more aimed at co-op, so they should be fun with a friend. And the art style and music is great. Actually, going back to recap footage, I was amazed at how detailed First Frights was. Here there's some really nice hints in the environment. They're not shoved in your face, it's just perfect. I also really liked the character designs in First Frights. They were simple but had a lot of personality. I think some of the characters here are a bit too detailed and almost realistic, but I stomached them okay. I remember really liking the soundtrack in First Frights, but I seem to remember not being a big fan of Spooky Swamps. I remembered incorrectly. The soundtrack is awesome. There's some catchy tunes and it fits the mood perfectly. All in all, I really enjoyed Spooky Swamp. I do prefer First Frights as a whole, but this is still a really enjoyable game. It's not perfect, but then again, no game is. It's got a lot of replay value and completionists will be in heaven with all the bonus collectibles. I'll give it an 83%. If you find it in a store, don't pass it off as another lazy tie-in. Both of these games are underrated little gems.